There are many races in human form like humans, elves, and dwarves, and there are demons who, despite their small numbers, are much stronger than the human-like creatures. These two forces have been fighting for thousands of years, and this conflict led to the division of the continent of Leanders into east and west. But when a moderate demon king took the throne 300 years ago, this conflict began to calm down, and the human races lived in temporary peace. However, in the 5th month of the year 2826, this peace was shattered when a new demon king ascended to the throne and launched a fierce attack on the human races. This attack later became known as the Great Invasion. Several human countries fell, and by the 4th month of the following year 2827, the Gargan Empire, which was considered the greatest human fighting force, was destroyed. The human creatures resisted by gathering their remaining forces and launched an attack on the demons. There was a suicide squad that managed to sneak into the demon castle to assassinate their king. We see a human warrior attacking the demon king as those present prepare to fight, and there was an epic battle between them. After that, we see dead monsters everywhere. Then we move to the Suicide Squad as they roam the Demon King's castle. We see a knight checking on his friend Theron to see if he's okay, and we see drops of blood falling from him. He looks angrily at a demon warrior who smiles at him and prepares to fight him with a human prisoner behind her. Theron asks his friends to go and that he will handle this demon warrior. His two friends leave him and go. Theron slowly approaches the demoness with his sword in his hands. Then we see his two friends standing before a giant gate. The knight takes out a small bottle and drinks what's inside it, and suddenly his eyes turn red. Then the knight enters through the gate with his female companion, and they see a red jewel in front of them. The knight approaches it. His companion warns him that there are red orbs attacking him. The knight tries to dodge them with his sword, but a red orb hits his leg. There was a red orb that would have finished him off, but his companion tried to destroy it with her magic staff, but the orb exploded and killed his companion before his eyes. Meanwhile, a winged creature appears in front of him and releases a group of red orbs. The knight prepares to face this creature with his sword. The knight attacks this creature and dodges the red orbs and strikes it with his sword, but the creature turns its hands into a sword, and they exchange combat, but the creature fires a group of red orbs at him. The knight tries to dodge them but fails. The knight asks the creature what this attack is. The creature explains that this is a high-level elimination spell that destroys everything. The knight decides to use the magical gem's power to face this creature and its magic spell. Indeed, the knight uses the power of the gem in his sword and attacks this creature. The creature tries to block the knight's attack, but the knight finally manages to pierce the creature's body with his sword. The creature's body scatters before the knight, and the knight falls to the ground, dropping his sword from his hands, saying finally it's over. Silence falls over the place and the knight feels he is the only survivor. He closes his eyes and remembers his family and friends he lost, and falls to the ground, but he hears a sound coming from the red jewel in front of him, and it glows red around it. The knight here tries to get up to go to this jewel, so its magical power doesn't get out of control. The injured knight climbs up to it and reaches out to grab it, and finally manages to grab it. During this, a magic circle appears around him, and the knight begins to suffer pain. Then we see a flying butterfly landing on a flower. Suddenly this butterfly disappears, and the scene changes to the knight waking up on a bed. He looks around and sees he's in a house. Wondering if this is his room, he gets up from his bed and goes to the window overlooking the city buildings. He sees the beauty of this city but quickly remembers the scene of fires that were in the city, and his eyes tear up as he thinks he's dreaming. Meanwhile, a girl enters to wake him up and says, "Wake up, Kyle," but notices he's already awake. Kyle looks at her and says, "Lizzie." The girl Lizzie approaches him and asks if his stomach hurts. At this moment, Kyle looks at her and hugs her, convinced he's in a dream. But Lizzie gets embarrassed and tries to move away from him, but he doesn't move away from her. She tries to push him away and they fall on the bed. Lizzie gets angry and hits him with her head in his stomach, and Kyle falls on the bed in pain. Lizzie yells at him saying she's not emotionally ready right now and leaves the room angrily. Meanwhile, Kyle is in pain and says to himself that he feels pain, so this isn't a dream. He pulls the blanket from the bed and finds the red jewel, so he holds it in his hand and confirms here that this isn't a dream. Kyle looks at the mirror and notices he's younger and has no injuries on his body. He wonders what's happening to him. Kyle goes to the window overlooking the city and sees that the city has returned to its old nature. Also, Lizzie has returned to life again, and he has become younger, so he believes he has traveled back in time to the past. He takes the red jewel out of his pocket and looks at it, thinking it's the reason behind what happened to him. Meanwhile, he feels hungry, so he goes to the dining room and sees many types of food on the table. He thinks Lizzie prepared this food for him, because Lizzie used to come to their house has to cook for him and his mother because they couldn't cook. Kyle smiles and sits on a chair and starts eating. His eyes tear up because he hasn't tasted food like this in a long time, and he continues eating. We see later that Kyle has eaten all the food that was on the table. Meanwhile, someone appears from behind Kyle and is surprised that Kyle ate all the food by himself and searches in the dishes for food. At this moment, Kyle looks at him and says, "Theron." He remembers that he was fighting with him just moments ago. This moment, Theron looks at him and asks what he's looking at. Kyle handles the situation and asks him about today's date. Kyle is surprised when Theron answers and tells him they're on the 24th day of the 5th month of the year 2823. Kyle shouts at Theron asking if he's sure about that, and Theron replies yes. He continues telling him that today is his birthday and he should consider this meal he ate as his birthday gift. Kyle tells him it's a cheap gift. Theron leaves him and says he's starving. Theron explains that if he goes and begs Lizzie, she'll bring him a delicious meal. Theron leaves and leaves Kyle, who says to himself that Theron will do anything to achieve his goals. Here Kyle wonders what to do, and whether he really returned to the past because of magical power. We see Kyle then going to the building next to his house, and we see this building is his library. Kyle sees a girl reading a book, and is amazed when he sees her, remembering that this girl had died. Meanwhile, the girl looks at Kyle and tells him it's rare for him to come here. Becomes clear to us that this girl is his mother who spent the whole night reading books and didn't feel time passing. Kyle here asks his mother to ask her a question about magic. His mother doesn't know if she has an answer to his question or not. Kyle reminds her that she's one of the great magicians in the city, so his mother smiles at him. Kyle asks her if there's a magic spell to go back in time to the past. His mother answers yes, and explains that there are spells that affect time, but they don't know where they are and no one can use them because it relates to magical power. She also explains that even if the greatest magician in history used all his magical energy, she doubts he could time travel even for 1 second. Kyle asks here even if he used a magical object. His mother is amazed here and explains that it's an excellent idea. He could use the magical object as a catalyst to store magical energy. She explains that storing this amount of energy would take 1,000 years. Kyle replies asking about using forbidden rituals. His mother responds saying sacrifice rituals to convert life energy into magical energy, and looks at him asking where he learned this. Kyle gets confused and explains he read it in one of the books. His mother understands and explains it's impossible even if forbidden rituals were used. She continued that he would need the souls of half the human creatures on the continent. Here Kyle remembers the battle and says to himself that it's possible if half the continent's population was sacrificed. His mother continues that there's no catalyst capable of storing the magical energy required for time travel. She brings him a book and opens it saying she found it. She shows him a picture from the book and says the legendary sacred dragon heart is the only option. Kyle looks at the picture and sees this heart is the same red jewel he has. We understand here that the ancient magic kingdom of Axarls flourished thanks to the sacred dragon heart for 1,000 years, but its energy was exhausted, and this led to the kingdom's fall. Kyle's mother explains that the sacred dragon heart is capable of storing magical energy for time travel, but it's been lost for 1,000 years and she suspects the demons found it. Now Kyle understands the matter. His mother is happy because they haven't talked this much in a long time, since Kyle used to avoid her, but Kyle explains he didn't mean to do that and apologizes to her. His mother tells him he's become more mature today, as if he returned from the future. Kyle is surprised by her words, but his mother explains she's joking. Here she feels hungry and tells Kyle that Lizzie prepared food for them again. Kyle answers explaining that he ate all the food by himself. His mother is amazed and Kyle explains he couldn't control himself. His mother asked if today is his birthday, and Kyle replied that as usual she forgot his birthday. She smiled and replied that he should consider this meal as his birthday gift. Kyle asks in despair why everyone is stingy with gifts for him. After that we see Kyle sitting alone outside looking at the sacred dragon heart he has, saying going back to the past and wondering what this heart wanted him to redo. Kyle is surprised by Lizzie standing behind him. Suddenly Kyle apologizes to her for what he did to her in the morning. Lizzie tells him at least he feels bad. Kyle explains he did that because he saw a strange and disturbing dream, and apologizes to her again. Lizzie asks him about his disturbing dream. Kyle remains silent. She asks if he saw her die. Kyle looks at her and says something like that. Here Lizzie understands why Kyle was disturbed in the morning, so she smiles and sits in front of him saying she forgives him. She explains that today is also his birthday and wishes him a happy birthday. Here Kyle looks at her and remembers that his town is close to demon territories and that his town was the first to be attacked in the Great Invasion. They burned it all until it became like hell. He remembered losing Lizzie and had sworn that day to avenge her. Meanwhile, Lizzie was calling him and Kyle woke up from his thoughts. Lizzie asked him what's wrong and explained that he's scaring her. Kyle replied and reassured her. Lizzie sat next to him. Here Kyle says to himself that after 3 years this peace will end, and he's the only one who knows this. If he doesn't do something, he'll watch his town burn again and lose those he loves. He shouts here loudly, saying he will change his fate, stands up and repeats that he will change his fate and the fate of this world, swearing he will do it no matter what it costs. Lizzie looks at him in amazement. Finally, we see Kyle writing down the events he remembers that will happen in the future in a diary, wondering what he should do. The demons will launch an attack after 3 years, and if he asks people to prepare, they won't believe him. He decides he will kill the Demon King himself, but backs down from this decision because he knows he can't do this alone with his current strength. He gets up from his place and goes to his sword and picks it up. We see Kyle training with a sword while recalling the demonic creature that defeated him in the future. The creature throws red balls at Kyle, which he avoids with his sword, but a large red ball hits him in the face. Kyle realizes he has 3 years left until the Great Invasion, and that he hasn't trained seriously in sword fighting and magic before. He casts some spells and notices that his magical power has increased. He attacks the creature, but a magical red ball hits him and knocks him to the ground. Kyle understands that he has great magical power, but his body can't keep up, and he'll die if he performs a reckless charge. He realizes it's pointless to die while trying to become stronger and to live in health and happiness as he grows older. Meanwhile, Theron and Lizzie are watching him. They wonder what's wrong with him. Lizzie explains that he seems strange. Theron mentions that Kyle would give up after 15 consecutive stare challenges over 3 days. And of course, Theron won. Suddenly, a woman appears behind them asking what they're planning, and Lizzie welcomes her, revealing that this is Layla San, Theron's mother. She asks Lizzie if her son Theron can take care of himself. Lizzie informs her that he comes to her begging for food, which annoys Theron. Layla San looks at Kyle, wanting to know what kind of monster he's fighting and that he's acting differently. Lizzie clarifies that he had the eyes of a dead fish yesterday. Theron adds that it was Kyle's dream to inherit. Layla San explains that a kid like Kyle suddenly changes because of a woman. Lizzie is surprised here, but Layla San sees Lizzie's surprise and explains that she might be mistaken. Kyle feels a burning sensation in his back and believes it's due to his magical power. Lizzie approaches him and asks who the woman is. Kyle doesn't understand the question. Lizzie grabs him roughly to make him confess. Kyle doesn't understand her behavior and is shaken a lot, causing him to vomit. After that, Lizzie brings food to Kyle and apologizes for her behavior, but he is upset. Theron, sitting next to Kyle, is happy about the food. Kyle looks at Layla San and expresses his happiness with her return, as well as his mother's. He asks if he can pose question to everyone. Layla San is surprised by his manner. Kyle asks who has the full authority to control multiple countries and persuade them. Theron is astonished by his question. Layla San thinks about his question. Then his mother replies that the high priest on the motherland Kyra's side has influence. And Layla San says Randolph the hero, the one who defeated the Demon King 300 years ago. Theron clarifies that elves, dwarves, and humans will heed him. Kyle understands that kings, heroes, and priests are the ones people listen to, and he must become a hero in the next 2 years. He gets up. Layla San looks at him, confirming that something has happened to him. Lizzie doesn't see a problem. Kyle is now thinking about the future, and they need to keep an eye on him. Theron agrees with this. Kyle wonders why his back is hurting now. That night, as Kyle lies in bed surrounded by books, he realizes he has the advantage of knowing the future. Theron enters and is astonished. Kyle tells him that he doesn't feel grateful for having a mother obsessed with books. Theron sits beside him and asks if he is sure he wants to be a hero. Kyle responds with a yes. Theron explains that this isn't something that can be done easily. Kyle grasps that and asks Theron if he has any ideas for him. Theron asks about defeating the Demon King. Kyle answers that if he could do that, he wouldn't be hanging around. Theron agrees with what he says. Kyle asks him what a hero needs. Theron replies power. Kyle responds that power alone is useless, and continues that he thinks he needs money. Theron explains that this is stated strangely. Kyle says that a hero doesn't accept rewards for saving others, but traveling and adventuring require money. Theron understands that doing this needs funding. Kyle continues that a hero needs connections with famous and influential people, because it enhances your reputation. Theron starts to worry. Kyle goes on that with money and connections, you can do most things, but that's not enough. Theron asks what else he needs. Kyle replies that a hero needs luck, but not just any luck. It must be being in the right place at the right time during disasters to step in and become a hero. Theron looks at him and asks if he means. Kyle interrupts, saying he doesn't mean to fabricate disasters to solve them himself, but he is ready to use all available means, even if they are deceptive. Theron says this isn't what a future hero would say, and asks Kyle why he wants to become a hero. Kyle responds with a question, feeling curious. Theron looks at him, clarifying that he doesn't feel that Kyle's real goal is to become a hero, but he wants to accomplish something. Kyle smiles, telling him he has his reasons, and Theron must trust him. Theron stands up, wishing him good luck, and leaves the room. Kyle tells himself that Theron will help him, and opens his notebook, saying he will use this for funding, and he wants to meet her again soon. As for fame, if he can do something about the Arkan incident, he continues that the time will then be short. Next morning, we hear Lila-san tell Kyle that she will go on a journey, and asks him if he told Soraya. Kyle replies yes, and that she cried a lot. Layla-san responds that she is overprotective of him, and adds that it's good to explore the world, asking him to take Theron with him, which surprises Theron. Kyle clarifies that he was going to do that and is now happy that he got her permission. Layla-san insists that Theron is a strong shield, and Kyle promises her that he will not waste his abilities. Theron becomes angry here as he sees he has no say in this. Later, we hear Lizzie ask Kyle if he will go on a journey. Kyle responds yes, and it's in 2 days, so she asks where he will go. Kyle says he will go to the royal capital Malad to buy what he needs there, then start the real work. Lizzie looks at him and asks him to listen to her, but Kyle interrupts and clarifies that he won't take her with him. Lizzie gets angry and makes it clear that she is training with the prophecy warriors and won't be a hindrance to him. Kyle looks at her and explains that her mother doesn't want her to face danger. She replies that she will apologize to her at her grave. Kyle continues that he wants her to stay in a safe place. He promises her she will be the first person to visit him when he returns, and asks her to wait for him. Lizzie looks at him, saying she has nothing to say to him. Kyle smiles at her, saying consider it the bond of courage that comes with aging. She asks what he means. They are 16 years old, and here Lizzie asks Kyle to promise her that he will return safe, and Kyle promises her that. Then, we see Kyle apologizing to Lizzie for asking her to accompany him to the market, but Lizzie doesn't mind. Suddenly, Lizzie sees an elf creature and says she's beautiful. Kyle is surprised, leaves Lizzie, and goes to the elf creature. Suddenly, we see that Kyle remembers her from his future, where they are sitting together and she asks him to call her by her real name, which is, here. Kyle speaks and says Axis. The creature is surprised and angry, asking him what he said. Kyle is surprised because this is supposed to be their first meeting, and it's a secret name for her that shouldn't be revealed. Axis asks her, "Who are you?" and draws her swords, but Kyle catches up to her and asks her to slow down. Axis asks him to let go of her hands. Kyle realizes this will cause a stir, but he can't do anything, and suddenly we hear Kyle ordering Axis to sleep, and she truly falls asleep on him. Kyle explains that Axis had said before that she had visited Ramarzi, but he didn't expect to meet her. Suddenly, he remembers Lizzie, who is standing behind him, seething with anger. She tells Kyle that she knows the creature is beautiful, but she didn't expect him to approach her so quickly. Kyle looks at her nervously and promises to explain the matter to her, that he felt lonely without her. But Lizzie interrupts him and tells him, "What are you saying? I'm here." Gets angry and insists that she will definitely go with him on his journey. At home, we see everyone at the table, and Kyle says he's pleased to meet her, and he asks her, "Is your name Urza-san, isn't it?" Axis stands up angrily and tells him that only she and her father know this name, and she asks him how he knew it. Kyle hesitates because he can't tell her now, as the event is 4 years away, and they will fall in love, and she will tell him the name herself. Axis explains that she must kill him, so he doesn't reveal the secret of this name. Lizzie looks at her and says, "Wait." Kyle says he will tell her in the end. Axis gets angry and asks him if he realizes the importance of an elf's true name. Kyle replies yes, and that he won't let her kill him, and he suggests to her, until he can tell her, "Why don't you apply the contract to prevent him from using her name for evil?" Axis is surprised by Kyle because he knows about applying the contract. Kyle explains that contracts are usually made with spirits, but in the name of kings, and those who control the elements can grant their true names to bind humans. He continues that the condition of the contract is not to tell anyone her name and not to use it for evil, and he asks her what she thinks. Axis asks him, does he know what will happen if he breaks the contract? Kyle replies, "Yes, I will die." Lizzie is shocked here. Axis backs down and says that his life is also at stake, and she continues, "Let's do it if he's serious." But Axis can't perform the contract now because the moon isn't full, and the full moon will be in a few weeks, so they have to wait until then. Kyle apologizes because he will leave tomorrow. Axis is surprised. After that, we see Kyle's mother crying because Kyle is preparing to leave, and Lizzie reassures her not to worry because she will be with him. Kyle asks her, "Are you really coming with him?" Lizzie replies, "Of course, it's decided." Kyle's father wishes him good luck. and advises him to take care of his friends. Kyle stands without a reply. Lizzie alerts him that his father is talking to him. Kyle understands this and asks his father and mother to take care of themselves, and his mother cries, and Kyle leaves with Theron and Axes, and Lizzie follows them. As they walk, Theron expresses that he's happy. A beautiful creature like Axis is joining them on the journey. Axis clarifies to him that she's not with them but only observing Kyle. Lizzie asks Kyle, isn't the capital the other way? Kyle smiles and says, let's leave that for later, and he continues, since Urza, the element controller, is with us. She replies to him and says she's not part of their group, and Theron and Lizzie clap, and Kyle continues that they will first go to the Sangard Mountains, and he asks them about the legend of Sangard. Lizzie replies and asks, isn't it the legend about the magical kingdom of Axarls? Theron also says, the one about the magical princess's maze? That place is just a legend. Kyle approaches them and explains that he actually has a map of the place, and it shows the treasure chamber. Lizzie looks at him despairingly, and Theron says that Kyle was tricked by a fake map, but Kyle insists it's real. Lizzie is sorry because he wants to believe that. Theron explains that people interested in money end up miserable. Kyle understands that they won't be able to believe him at the moment, but Axis suddenly says that the map is made of a magical tree over 1,000 years old, and this technique has been lost for a long time and can no longer be made, and she suggests that the map is original. Theron suddenly believes Axis's words because beautiful people's words are trustworthy. Lizzie looks at the map and says, it's a vast place, and she continues, how long will it take to reach the treasure? Kyle reassures her that he has a plan. Lizzie and Theron wonder about the plan. Kyle says, we will dig, and we see Kyle and Theron digging, and Theron asks why they are digging a tunnel. Kyle explains to him that they are making a shortcut to the treasure because the maze is large and full of traps. Theron is shocked by Kyle's words, and Kyle continues that there are also puzzles and magical weapons. Theron angrily asks Kyle if all of this was shown on the map. Kyle hesitates because he knows all of this due to the troubles he faced before, but he tells Theron that the maze is legendary and they must be careful. And Kyle continues that when he said he wanted to be a hero, he didn't know that the first thing he would do is dig a tunnel. We hear Axis say, why are we using a dwarf spirit to do this? Kyle explains to her that this saves them from buying magical equipment, and Axis asks Theron to stop digging because she hasn't finished reinforcing the walls. Theron asks her, what is this? And she tells Kyle to use detect magic to confirm the direction of the treasure chamber. Theron asks Kyle why Urza seems more interested now. Kyle tells him that she's a serious girl. Urza orders them to stop talking. At night, the friends eat, and Kyle says it's very delicious. And also Urza, who feels the food is refreshing after the effort she used in spirit magic. Lizzie asks them to eat, and Urza asks her, did you catch this bear? Lizzie replies yes. Urza asks her, did you catch it with a trap? Lizzie answers that she caught it with her hands. Urza is surprised. After some time, we see Kyle looking at the map and saying we're almost there, and Urza comes to him and asks about Theron, who hasn't returned yet. Kyle explains to her that Theron said he would take a break, so Urza asks him why he wants to be a hero, and she looks at his rings and asks him, are they part of your training? Kyle replies that each ring doubles his body weight by 2 or 3, and he digs and says that he's currently improving his physical fitness. So she asks him why he endures all this hardship, and does it have anything to do with knowing her real name? Kyle doesn't answer, but at that moment he shouts and says, we've arrived, and he asks her to call Lizzie and Theron, and we see Kyle hit the wall, and it collapses, and we see the treasure in front of them, which they look at in astonishment, and Theron runs wildly towards the gold. Kyle demands that they stay focused, and he reminds them that they only need money to achieve their goal. Urza agrees with him, and Lizzie also, and he asks them to look at Theron, who has gone crazy with money. At this moment, Kyle says it's his chance, and Kyle leaves them and goes to the chamber with the sword, and suddenly a girl appears in front of him and says she's impressed a human reached here. The girl explains to Kyle that he has overcome many obstacles to stand before her, and when she was completing her speech, Kyle silences her and makes her understand that his friends will hear her. The girl gets angry and says to him, dare you? Kyle interrupts her and asks her to calm down. He explains to her that he knows from her that she is an exact copy of the magic queen Sildonia, who ruled the ancient magic kingdom. The girl is surprised and asks him how he knows her. Kyle replies that he will explain that to her later, and continues that he has overcome her traps and riddles to get here, and that he has dug a shortcut. Sildonia responds how he dares to do that to her tomb. Kyle moves and asks her to begin the last test, and that he will take the sword. Sildonia is also surprised and asks him who he is. Kyle answers, you will know soon, and smiles. The girl turns into a green light and enters the sword. Kyle pulls out the sword, and remembers his friends and what happened to him before. Sildonia appears before him again, and asks him, is this real? Kyle understands that she read his thoughts, and explains to her that he has the sacred dragon heart. Sildonia is surprised because she knows that time magic exists, and at this moment his friends come to look for him. Kyle is annoyed because they don't know anything, and asks Sildonia to go along with him. She asks him how. Lizzie asks him what he is doing here. Kyle acts surprised that he found a legendary sword. His friends say, "What?" Then we see Sildonia eating Lizzie's meals, and explains that these meals are very delicious. Lizzie explains that she prepared them for their journey, and asks her if she is really the magic queen. Sildonia explains that she is part of her, and that she is a magical living being created to evaluate their worthiness of her treasure. Theron asks her how she can eat meals. She replied that she transforms them into magical energy to support herself. Lizzie asks her why she looks like a child. Sildonia explains that she froze her growth at the age when her magical power reached its peak, and continues that if they do not deserve her treasure, she would have done the last trap and destroyed the maze, but she is satisfied with Kyle and that he can use this sword. Kyle thanks her, and Sildonia asks him to take the summoning bag because it is connected to the treasure room and is suitable for extracting the treasure. Theron interrupts her. Can he use the sword too? And can he use it instead of Kyle? Sildonia is surprised and refuses that. Lizzie apologizes to Theron. Orza explains that tastes haven't changed in 1,000 years. After that, on the street, we see Sildonia enjoying meals with them. Kyle asks her that she can eat later. Sildonia smells a delicious food coming from a kiosk and goes to it, but Theron catches her and confirms that she is like naive rural children visiting the city for the first time in their lives. At this time, Lizzie asks Kyle where they are going. Kyle replies that they got the treasure, and it's time to prepare for battles, and they need high-quality equipment, and they go to a store. Seller asks them what they want. Kyle requests buying some equipment. The seller apologizes and asks him if someone referred him here. Kyle remembers that new customers must provide a deposit before entering the store. The seller apologizes and asks him that he wants 10,000 Godal as a deposit. Kyle asks him if 4 golden Exarls pieces are enough. The seller is surprised and thanks them for dealing with him. Then he shows them what's inside the store. Then we see a man named Vespa, and he is the store owner. Sildonia asks him if these clothes are made by Melanus. Vespa is surprised and asks her how she knew, because he was exceptional in the ancient magic kingdom. Sildonia explains that he was not that great because he would cry whenever she pointed out the flaws in his work. Vespa is surprised, and at this time Kyle appears and puts his hand on Sildonia's mouth and apologizes to Vespa for the words of a little girl. Vespa accepts his apology. Then we see Sildonia sitting and eating another meal. We hear Vespa saying that he sees Kyle wearing dragon leather armor that has physical and magical protection, and they made it resistant to heat, cold, and poison. Kyle requests to buy it. Vespa is happy. Theron appears and refuses to wear the same clothes. Kyle looks at Lizzie and Orza and asks them to buy what they need from here. Lizzie agrees, and Orza wonders what to buy. Kyle wears the outfit and notices that it is easier to move than he expected. Lizzie is impressed by the gloves, and Orza wears a soul stone amulet, and it's the first time she wears such an amulet. Theron asks a girl in the store if they have an attractive sword, and the girl goes to bring it, and we see Sildonia still eating. Meanwhile, Kyle asks the store owner to show him the magic stones. Vespa asks Kyle about his opinion on an attack stone containing explosion magic. Kyle asks him about a stone useful against crawling monsters. Vespa brings him another stone. Kyle explains that this is a blizzard stone. Vespa replies yes, and continues that it is difficult to add frost spells to stones because they are expensive. Kyle replies that he will take all of them. Vespa is surprised and asks Kyle if he will take all the stones. Kyle continues that if he also has healing potions, he will take them all too. Vespa is surprised and asks him, "Will you take them all?" Kyle explains to him that he will pay with jewels, and they are worth 10 million Godal. Vespa is shocked and can't believe himself. Then we see Vespa and the sellers greeting Kyle and his friends as they leave. Theron explains that it was an amazing shopping trip and hopes no malicious rumors spread. Kyle turns and reassures him that they will leave tomorrow. Theron is surprised and explains that there is no time to waste, and Lizzie also explains that she will take a look around because she rarely visits the royal capital, and Orza asks to accompany her. Lizzie thanks her and they greet Kyle. Kyle is happy that they are getting closer. Suddenly Sildonia appears and also wants to go and indicates that there is definitely a restaurant with delicious food. Kyle stops her because he wants to talk to her about something, and Sildonia agrees. Kyle talks to Sildonia that he wants to verify something and asks her if it is really possible to change the future. Sildonia replies that this is a strange thing for her to say and continues that the future is not predetermined. Kyle asks her to explain. Sildonia responds that when she returned through time, she returned to the same time in another world, and her theory is that there is not one timeline, but time branches, like tree branches, and Kyle's soul jumped from one branch to another, and the proof of that is the sacred dragon heart he used as a catalyst, has also been transferred. Kyle understands from that if this is a new world, it is not necessary to follow the same history. Sildonia replies not exactly the same, but important details will not change, and she confirms to him that the great invasion will happen. Kyle understands her words, and Sildonia assumes that they can write history themselves through their actions, but this will be difficult. Kyle confirms to her that this was enough for him, and asks her if there are two sacred dragon hearts in this world, correct? But there is only one version of it. Sildonia has a theory for that too, that the highest magic on the list of forbidden magic is the merge spell. Kyle is curious, and asks her what it is, because he has never heard of it before. Sildonia explains to him that it is a spell to raise magical power by merging souls. Kyle repeats her words in surprise, and Sildonia continues that your magical power is determined at birth according to your spiritual composition, and she continues that in the ancient Exarls, they conducted research on strengthening souls, and that this can be done by merging them, but there are several problems. Kyle asks her, "Did you fail?" Sildonia replies yes, and continues that they tried using infant souls and tested artificial souls, and they were not afraid of anything, but she got off topic, and explains to Kyle that there are two sacred dragon hearts now, and asks him what he thinks happened to Kyle's soul in this world. Kyle asks her in confusion, what happened? Is it possible? Sildonia replies that this is true, that she is there, and Kyle looks at his hands, and Sildonia continues that soul merging happened to him without him realizing it, and supposedly a soul increased in strength, and his magical power also doubled, and asks him if he remembers that. Kyle remembers his previous training. Sildonia explains to him that he can use powerful magic spells in the future. Kyle is surprised, but Sildonia reminds him that this is just her own theory, and that his ability to master it is another thing. Kyle asks her if this will cause negative effects. Sildonia does not know because this is unprecedented, and asks him to inform her immediately if he notices anything unusual, and Kyle thanks her. At night, Lizzie clarifies that she's used to camping outside, but the bed is wonderful. Orza agrees with her. Lizzie asks her when she will sleep. Orza explains that every month she looks forward to the moment when the full moonlight engulfs her body. Lizzie has to sleep. Orza thinks this trip isn't bad and that Lizzie is a good girl, and that Sildonia has extensive knowledge. Theron is fun to watch, and there's Kyle, who looks at her as if he knows what's going on in her mind, but this doesn't bother her. Suddenly, Lizzie screams while sleeping, saying she's the only one allowed to approach Kyle. Orza understands she's talking in her sleep and looks at the moon, but suddenly she screams and clarifies that she forgot something. Then we see Kyle fallen on the ground in the middle of the forest. He explains that his endurance has improved, but he still has a long way to go. Sildonia appears and tells him about ghost training, explaining it didn't exist in her era. Kyle looks at her and confirms that this doesn't compare to real combat. He looks at his sword and feels it's part of him. Sildonia confirms this and adds that the sword is an embodiment of Ixarlis's magical technique. No human-made sword matches its power. Kyle tells her he used mithril swords before, but they don't compare to this sword. Sildonia explains that this sword is not made of mithril. Kyle is surprised. Suddenly Orza arrives. Kyle is shocked and asks what brought her here. Orza reminds him of the contract's implementation. Kyle had also forgotten. Orza tells him this was his suggestion. Kyle realizes this but asks to do it later. Orza gets angry because the next date is a month away and her real name is at stake. Kyle is forced to agree since she insists. We see Orza saying they usually reveal each other's real names, and they pledge to stay together for life, and it's held in a marriage ceremony. Her heart trembled when she first heard it. She never imagined doing this with someone she's known for only half a month. She calls out to Kyle and tells him to stand here, but Kyle has fallen asleep. Orza calls him. Kyle wakes up and apologizes to her and stands before her. She explains she will implement the contract. We see magical things Orza does. Kyle thinks from now on things will be as before, and Orza implements the contract, ordering Kyle not to reveal her real name to anyone or use it for evil. She orders him to swear, and he swears. Suddenly a strong light appears reaching the sky. Kyle moves closer to her. Orza pushes him away. Here Kyle apologizes to her, but suddenly we see Orza explaining that since she's in the magic circle, she's making a contract with a salamander fire spirit. Kyle is surprised. Orza looks at him and says the first order is to burn the person in front of him. We hear Kyle's scream and an explosion sound. In the morning, fatigue is evident on Kyle, Orza, and Theron. Lizzie asks them what happened. Kyle tells her a minor incident occurred last night. Orza orders him to stay silent. Lizzie asks Kyle about the burning smell coming from him. Kyle says she'll understand what happened last night. He looks at Orza and clarifies the contract was implemented. He asks why she continues the journey with them. She replies she wants to know how and why he knows her real name, and she won't let Kyle out of her sight. Theron tells them he's tired. Lizzie interrupts. saying he was surely flirting with women. Theron gets angry. Lizzie asks them to ignore him and asks why they're heading to Arkan. Kyle hesitantly replies that Sildonia has a prediction. Sildonia is surprised. Kyle continues that according to his reading, Arkan should be their next destination. Sildonia agrees. Lizzie is surprised by her response, and Kyle assures her she's imagining things. They reach Arkan, and Lizzie is shocked by the crowd. Theron explains that Princess Melina is coming to offer condolences, and he always hoped to see her. Lizzie says they're lucky. Orza also notes this is her first time seeing the princess. Then the princess appears before the crowd. Orza explains the princess is the future queen. They confirm she's truly beautiful. We see children gathering around her. A child suddenly falls, and we see the princess going to comfort her. People in the crowd applaud, with some commoners noting the princess dedicates time to this visit. At this moment, Kyle sees the princess's guard, Zentos, who looks at Kyle and then walks away. Sildonia asks Kyle if he's sure this is the princess. Kyle replies yes, that she's 16 and destined to die in 2 days. Later, Kyle sits with Sildonia and tells her, in 2 days, the princess will die on her way from Arkan to Sanis village, and Hydra will attack the convoy. He explains the forest near Arkan is full of monsters. Sanis village was attacked by Hydra for a month. The princess came after hearing about this attack. She'll head to Sanis village, which is still dangerous, and will be killed there. People will say it's a tragedy and bad luck, but Kyle believes it's due to her recklessness. Sildonia asks if there's something suspicious about her death, like a planned assassination to be blamed on monsters. Kyle explains these are different rumors about the princess's death. He continues that the greatest suspicion was her half-brother, Prince Carinus, because he's second in line to the throne as the son of a mistress, and he'd benefit most from her death. He notes what raises suspicion is that the prince is currently in the city. Sildonia tells him no one is talking about this. Kyle tells her the prince is introverted and doesn't appear publicly, and concludes these are all rumors about her death. Ultimately considered an unfortunate incident, Sildonia understands Kyle wants to exploit this situation. Kyle replies yes, because by saving the princess, he will become a hero.